Welcome inside the Hill City Highlights podcast, a podcast about the people of Lynchburg, for the people of Lynchburg. Now, here's your host, Alan York.
Welcome back inside another edition of our Hill City Highlights podcast, episode 4. And today we're going to dive in with Ken Hess with County Smoak BBQ. That's Smoak, S-M-O-A-K. So Ken, good to catch up with you. We've been buddies for a couple of years here. Just kind of take me into your world now, in the world of barbecue and catering and just the food service industry and the success you're having here in Lynchburg. Then we'll kind of get into your career as the owner and operator of County Smoak BBQ.
Absolutely, Alan. Thank you for having me on the show. Glad to be here. We started May 12th of 2020, the absolute worst time to ever open anything. Restaurants typically are one of the most risky things to ever open, and we did it in absolutely the wrong time to ever do it. But, necessity breeds success sometimes, and I think you're going to see that this is the new, what I call my grandparents' generation of success stories that you see that came out of the Great Depression. Jess has kind of coined a phrase that we use called COVIDpreneurs, where people are going to be talking about the businesses that started during COVID or right after COVID. I think till, your children and my children have children, and they're going to be like, Grandpa Ken and Grandma Jess started County Smoak back in like 2020, like it was so long ago. But, you think about the 1930s and it's this kind of, economic problems that were going on and workforce was not working. And so you're looking at a lot of similarities there. And, one of our successes has been being able to pivot and move. And as a business that was opening and figuring things out, we were able to pivot a lot faster than other restaurant groups and larger places that had, really big dining rooms and huge mortgages and stuff like that. And we got, we worked hard for it, but we also kind of hit like the perfect storm of already having online ordering, as a process, because we were in a small building. We already knew these things would be needed for our success. And then when COVID happened, we were kind of poised to strike while the fire was hot. So.
Joined by Ken Hess with County Smoak BBQ. While we're on the topic, Ken, if you open up your business, most of everybody knows where your location is there on Timberlake Road. What moment in time, Ken, did you and Jess look at each other? You never want to say we made it, but coming out of COVID or maybe during that time in 2020 where we're on to something here. There's a spark and there's a flame starting to build here. We're going to be just fine. And you never want that feeling of complacency. But what point for you and Jess did you think we're going to be okay here off Timberlake?
Even yesterday we were worried about things. So I don't know, for Jess and I, it's never been something with both of our trainings, both of us being chefs, and in the chef industry in general, you don't rest on your laurels. I mean, when I was an apprentice at the Greenbrier, the rule was, your first plate and your last plate have to be exactly the same always. And you're only as good as your last dish. And so for us, every rib we check, every pork butt we check, we try not to get complacent on it and, keep our staff going. One of our customers, Brandon, who comes in 3 or 4 times a week, he tried the smoked banana pudding. He's like, this is maybe one of the best banana puddings we've ever had. And, Jess is like, where was his favorite one at? And, and he's like, I don't know. It's like, I'm telling you right now, she's going to ask me, Brandon, because she's going to want to know what was different about it, what you liked more. He goes, it's not that I necessarily know a better one. He's like, it's just one of the best. He's like, I can't place it, but for us, it's like, and he kids with us. He's like, it's like you guys are Ricky Bobby. He's like, second place is the first loser. And that's how we judge everything all day long. If we mess something up, we own it, which I think is different than a lot of restaurants these days because they're just struggling to have bodies in place. But we're really trying to cultivate a culture of, professionalism, bringing quality of what we do every day and customer service, which frankly has just been lacking in all industries since COVID. And I think by us focusing on it, it gives us a standout. I mean, we're a little shack here on Timberlake Road. I mean, if you drive too fast down the hill from U-Haul, you miss us. But once you come in, you'll never forget us.
No doubt about that. Joined by Ken Hess with County Smoke Barbecue. We're mentioning Jess, his lovely wife that worked with you as well, Ken. And I think you hear a song for the first time. You're either going to want to listen to it a second time, a third time, or don't care too much for it. And food is the same way. And I think you only get that one time to make a good first impression. I remember hearing about County Smoke, and our video team came out and did a video part of This is Lynchburg. And I had not heard about County Smoke yet. And then some people here at Liberty were like, you got to go. And when their eyes get as big as silver dollars, I got to check it out. And I did, and I loved it. And I've been a fan ever since. Do want to go back to kind of growing up. Where are you from? And how did you get into wanting to be a chef?
Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. My dad always cooked at the house. My mom swears she cooked the first 11 years of my life, but then my mom went to law school and she was busy. And I jokingly kid now that my mom only knows where the kitchen is because the coffee maker's in there. So it's just something that I've loved food. And then, I thought I wanted to be a chef, but in the early 90s, late 80s, it wasn't considered a professional career, let's say, in terms of in the communities. It wasn't a lawyer, it wasn't a banker, it wasn't a doctor. It wasn't like one of the white collar fields. So, growing up in New York City, and I went to a private school. My parents, Food Network was maybe just starting when I started looking at being a chef. My dad had a bunch of cookbooks because he really loved cooking. And, my dad says when I was 12, I went and grabbed a Paul Prudhomme cookbook off the shelf, found a recipe, walked to the grocery store on Eastern Parkway, New York, bought all the ingredients and made it. And ever since then, I've been cooking at home or professionally. And then my mom kids that she sent me to go be a dishwasher at a small 50-seat restaurant in Brooklyn called the Garden Cafe. And she said, I just had to find a way to feed you because you ate so much. And so, as a growing boy working in restaurants, you always had food around. And so and then I loved it. I love the stress of it. I love the chaos. Every day is different. I mean, I imagine it's like for you when you're doing sports announcing, every game's different. You're going to see different kids playing, different schools you've seen 100 times that you guys have played against, and schools that, like, especially with Conference USA this year, that are brand new that you've never been. The team's has no history with them. So it's excitement for you, I'm sure, and that's why I love cooking. Every day is different, whether it's my sous chef calling and saying there's been a pit fire and he's had to pull fire extinguishers, to, hey, they didn't deliver pork butts today and we've got a party for 800 tomorrow. What are we going to do? So
chopping it up with Ken Hess with County Smoke Barbecue. So your first job in the food industry, how old were you, Ken, and what did you do?
I was 15 years old. I was a dishwasher. Like I said, it was the Garden Cafe, a small place in Brooklyn, New York. It was ranked number 50 in the Zagat Guide for New York City for many years while John and Camille ran it, which, for people who don't know the Zagat Guide, it's a guide that lists lots of high quality restaurants within the city. And to be even on it in New York City is a huge, honor. And then to be, it was a small, I think it was 25 seats, maybe 30, and to be ranked number 50 is a pretty big deal in New York City. And even for a Brooklyn restaurant to be ranked in the Zagat Guide was pretty crazy. So, and I did dishes, and, then it was one day the chef John's like, here, learn how to cut this onion or learn how to do this. And I just loved it. And being able to create things, which, with barbecue, it's the closest you can get to alchemy, which is when people were trying to turn like coal into gold and stuff like that, pouring chemicals on them and stuff. And really, you take these tough cuts of meat and you put them in a smoker for long hours, lots of smoke, wood, and fire, and you end up with a beautiful piece of meat that this raw it wasn't going to give it to you because it's a tougher cut. But if you treat it right, it turns into gold later.
So how does
That's
a
the joy I get.
15-year-old kid in Brooklyn washing dishes get into being a pit master? Tell us the migration and how many years that took to hone in on what you wanted to focus on.
Well, for me, I mean, so I wanted to go to the Culinary Institute of America when I first started high school, but like I said, it wasn't a career path yet for people. My parents wanted me to go and get a business degree first, just in case this cooking thing never worked out. My father's side of the family went to Oklahoma State, and at the time, Oklahoma State had one of the top 5 ranked hotel and restaurant schools in the country. Now, the only place that ranked hotel and restaurant schools was Cornell, which was always ranked #1. So I had originally applied to Cornell. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going too fast.
No, you're good.
But, so I had applied to Cornell, and my SAT scores were not very good, and I didn't make it in. And my friend Charlie Qualwasser, who ended up going to UVA, he was interviewing at Cornell. And the interviewee was like, "We don't normally ask about other students in an interview, but this guy Ken Hess says he's got like 2,000 hours in a restaurant, and he applied, and we just want to know, is he?" And I had gone to school with him since 5th grade, so he's like, "Ken goes home from school and does his homework on the bus ride home, and goes and washes dishes and cooks on the weekends, and that's all he does. He plays football and does sports, but he's going to be a chef." And I didn't get in Cornell, but I got in Oklahoma State, which 5 years at Oklahoma State, which I got done in 4 with 2 minors in a business, would have equaled 1 year of Cornell's tuition at the time. So, with my father's side of the family going to Oklahoma State, I got in-state tuition. And then from there, I went to the Culinary Institute of America. And, they didn't teach barbecue at Oklahoma State, but I ate barbecue while I was in Oklahoma State. And so I started eating it, and barbecue is one of those cuisines that's really passed down by word of mouth, and there's not a lot of cookbooks on it or there's more now in the last 10 years, but you just started, you had to learn it. And so I'd go hang out after CIA, when again, they didn't teach you about barbecue at all. It was mentioned in our American regional cuisines class, but it was like, oh yeah, American barbecue, that's one of the American cuisines, and that's about how far it went. So
go ahead.
That was it. No, my bad. So, while I was at CIA, I went down to the Greenbrier Resort. Because at the time, I thought I wanted to be a certified master chef and do the fine dining forever. And I left the CIA and went down to West Virginia. And I thought there'd be lots of barbecue, because in my mind, from being from New York, Virginia West or regular is just the South to me. And I thought there'd be barbecue everywhere. And I walked into this barbecue shack in Ronsford. No, was it Ronsford? It doesn't matter. Over by Lewisburg, West Virginia. One day on a day off, I walked in, and there's these ladies in like lab coats, and there's all these steam jacketed kettles. And it was this Spud's barbecue. And I was like, "Hey, I'm here to get some barbecue, like a sandwich or some ribs or something." Like, "No, sir, this is where we cook down these pork butts in barbecue sauce, and we package in cups for Walmart and Food Line, and we just ship it cold." And I'm like, well, this isn't what I wanted. So I ended up hanging out with the guy, Ethan Heilman, who did all the barbecue at the resort at the time at the Greenbrier. And the Greenbrier was a training hotel because I was an apprentice. And if you wanted to learn how to butcher a cow, you'd go down when they bought the state cows in from the state fair and the championship pigs and cow, and you learn how to break down whole animals. And because it was a teaching hotel, if you want to learn about pastries, you went to the pastry shop on your off hours. So I would do that with Ethan. I would go up and put meat on with him, help him pull it off, and just started liking barbecue. And then I bought a small offset smoker from Walmart, which at the time at $150 was a lot of money for me.
Yeah.
And, right next to the shack here, I've got a $50,000 smoker sitting here right now. So a lot of money is always relative. But, I started doing barbecue, and a lot of the servers in our area raised pigs and stuff, and they worked at the hotel for their insurance money, and they would ask me to cook hogs for them. And so I needed a bigger smoker, and I started doing contests. My first contest ever was here in Lynchburg, Virginia, down on the waterfront, about where that water fountain is next to the Water Dog. my rig was parked there right along the railroad. And, I never knew I'd be back here, but started competing. And in 2008, the crash, I was teaching barbecue classes with, we'd helped bring in Chris Lilly, Myron Mixon, and Ray Lampe, who's Dr. Barbecue, the Greenbrier. And during that time, CSX was selling the Greenbrier Resort because of the economic struggles. And I got hired down by Big Bob Gibson's in Decatur, Alabama. And with that crash, there was a big movement away from, I would say, fine dining and more comfort and casual kind of and more comfort food. And barbecue fit that. And the reaction we got from guests at the hotel, people just loved our barbecue. And I didn't see guests when I was in the fine dining restaurants in the same manner. Whereas when I was doing a catering chef, a barbecue chef at the Greenbrier, I dealt with the customers that were having their weddings. I dealt with their children, and they'd bring them back. And that was what I loved. And people loved the comfort food. And so I just kept going. And then I worked for a great family down at Big Bob Gibson's in Decatur, Alabama. And then, and this is a long story about my
It's
career.
okay.
Everyone goes into it, but
no, we love it. We love it.
My oldest daughter got into Mary Baldwin in Stanton, Virginia, when she was 13, and she was going to be 12 or 14 hours away from us in college. She skipped all of high school and just said, "Hey, we've got to find a job near Virginia." And she's like, I don't want to live in White Sulphur where the Greenbrier was. She's like, we're not going back there because there's not much in that town. There's like 2,000 people. And so she's like, we got to find something. And I reached out to Tuffy Stone, who's on a lot of the barbecue pitmaster shows. He's been a friend of mine since 2003. And, he's from Lynchburg, Virginia originally, and he was partnered with Steve Perry for a couple projects up in Richmond. Mm-hmm. And Steve had some work for me down here in Lynchburg, and we ended up loving Lynchburg. We love, the mountains. We love the people we've met here, and it's just something we just fell in love again with the mountains, which I missed them when leaving the Greenbrier. But our two youngest ones had some great experiences at schools nearby, and so then we were like, well, let's see. And then you start dining around, and there wasn't amazing barbecue here in town. There were people doing good things, but, not our style and how we wanted to open a place. So, after driving 3 months around the country in an RV with 3 kids and a dog, we kind of went to a lot of barbecue places where we saw a lot of great things, a lot of not so great things. And that developed Jess's and my concept for how we wanted to run a barbecue place and the quality we wanted. And when it came time with COVID and looking for spots, and we actually signed the lease for this February 1st of COVID year. And then, March 13th, the whole world blew up, and we had the day we opened, we had $3,000 left in all of our accounts. I had enough money to buy Jess and I 3 picnic tables. My dad picked them up on the back of a truck with my daughter at the time's ex-boyfriend now, but
yeah,
and that's what people came on, and that's what we had. And so for those of you that have come since the beginning days, to see how big it's gotten now is kind of crazy. And every time somebody comes back to drop their kids off to Liberty, and they're like, "Oh, I remember when my son was a freshman and you guys were here. Now he's a junior, and look at how much stuff you guys have." And it's just been an amazing thing. And at no day do we ever wake up saying, "Man, we made it," because every day with now County Sunrise coming up, we're having to find staff to do inside the Liberty football stadiums, all that we have now. We don't have time right now to rest and be like, hey, we made it. It's right. Like, we're still working on the line. We're still, meeting contractors, trying to get construction done. So it's pretty wild.
Going by Ken Hess with County Smoak Barbecue. Lots to still talk to you about, Ken. And obviously we're talking about County Smoak. You mentioned County Sunrise, who I know you and I have talked about it, but publicly, a lot of people may not know you're opening up a second venue. Take us inside that venue. What's it going to be? Hours of operation, and just tell our listeners there's other county smoke opportunities away from Timberlake Road to enjoy some good Southern country cooking.
Yeah, so County Sunrise, I mean, Jess and I, with both of us being chefs, have so many ideas on different things that we'd love to do here, but we can't take away from what is our core foundation of barbecue here at County Smoke. So, we've talked about doing breakfast items and all this stuff, and Jess loves breakfast. I mean, when we started dating, I didn't eat breakfast because I worked nights, and I'd rather sleep in if I got home at 1 o'clock in the morning than get up and make breakfast any day. But when she and I started dating, it's like her favorite meal of the day, and I now like breakfast a lot more. But we feel there's a need here for quality scratch cooking of Southern breakfast, Southern brunch. And with Jess's Jewish heritage, we've got a lot of things that we've developed over the years, like our smoked chicken and dumplings are done with matzo ball style for the dumplings versus the slider biscuit dough style, dumplings that people seem to like in the South as well. But even with smoke, like our slaws and everything, it's our twist on it. So you're going to see latkes, which is like a huge dish that's almost every night during Passover because it's fried in oil and it's part of the Festival of Lights. So latkes are a potato cake that are great for breakfast, lunch, dinner. I don't care when you eat them, but you'll see those on the menu. We're going to be doing our pastrami at the Green Bar, where we cure our own and then do a rub. And so we're going to be smoking our own pastrami here for women's over there. All these different kind of things, making our own biscuits from scratch. A lot of places are doing, pre-made frozen biscuits, and the quality's not there. And so it's next to Paulie's Barber Shop on Lakeside Drive, just down from Givens Books. County Sunrise will be open Tuesday through Sunday, starting at 7 a.m. every day, closing at 2 during the week, and then Saturday and Sundays we're at 3. But it's going to be a bright space. It's going to be, all inside seating. Unlike here, where I have 8 seats inside. There's going to be 40 to 45 seats inside for you. There's going to be a penny top bar that we're getting built and putting in. So you'll be able to, like, if you're just coming right before you're dropping your kids off from, or let's say you drop your kids off at school and you're like, man, they were just terrors this morning and I didn't get to eat, but I need to come get a quick breakfast burrito filled with some smoked brisket or some pulled pork in it. You can come get that, your coffee, and then head on into work if you need to. Or if you've got a meeting and you want to talk to Coach Chadwell about, the future of the program and what's going on, we could have a brunch too for you. Yeah. So we're just, the smoked chicken wings at the football stadium. We don't have a fryer here at County Smoke, so those will be featured over there. So you'll see barbecue and smoked meats on the menu, but it's not going to be a barbecue restaurant.
Right.
It's just you'll see highlights of our barbecue throughout the menu.
So when's the expected open date of that?
Man, I thought 3 months ago I'd already be open, but with the delays of life, we originally said mid-September because we wanted to get the first 2 home football games under our belt at the stadium. But looking at the delays I've had recently, it's probably going to be that last week of September, first week in October, which, with this year with the Tuesday and Thursday games in October with Conference USA, it's still going to be good for us to do that because we'll have the staff here for Tuesday nights and Thursday nights helping over at the stadium. Plus, we can use our sunrise staff in the nights because we're AM hours. So it'll still work out well for us. We're excited to show the public. Our sign goes up tomorrow at 7 a.m. and we know that that's going to be like a flood of questions. We've kind of been like, I see you, I tell you about it, but we haven't broadcast that we're opening it up everywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the can of worms is going to be open.
Joe, about Ken Hess with County Smoke Barbecue. A couple more thoughts here, Ken. Speaking of smoking meats, you're a professional at doing that. And you and I text occasionally about, hey, I'm going to try to do this. Give me a tip or two. The beauty of cooking is people can put their own spin on it. Same thing with smoking. There's no perfect way to do it. But when we go to restaurants, it's like, I like this, how they do it. That other place, I don't really like how they do it. So taste is important. Getting to a question here, there's a perfect way to do it to you, but just the scratch smoker they can put their own spin on it. And that's kind of cool when it comes to people doing it at their house. But can you mess it up in a way, I guess, when it's all said and done?
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many people that I'd say there's two things. A, depending on what cooker you're using, how often you're opening it up and closing it. The old phrase is if you're looking, you're not cooking for barbecue in the barbecue world. So if you're opening that smoker, it's going to take 30, 40 minutes to recover if it's not a good smoker. I mean, our Endeavor, which is our big smoker we have, it recovers in 10 to 15 minutes, which is a pretty quick time when you have 144 butts sometimes on there. But anytime you're opening that smoker up, if it's not a smoker that can recover the heat, like a lot of the ceramic cookers, like Green Eggs and Kamado Joe's, recover heat very quickly.
Yeah.
The Traegers can do it as well. Well, I know you sent me, I think it was last night, the day before, working on your Weber. Yeah, the Weber grill is the classic American grill, and I know a lot of people have been very successful with smoking on the Weber, but the really how thin the metal is, and it's designed for grilling and not holding low temperatures. You're going to be feeding that charcoal every 20 minutes to get a barbecue to smoke a butt. Where something like a ceramic cooker, I could load it once and I have to load it again for 24 hours. All of those things are tricks that help people, but I would say the next thing is that most people don't cook pork butts and briskets long enough. They pull it off too early. They think it's done. And really, we're pulling butts between 203 and 210, and it's by feel. And that's probably, I mean, it takes, when we say we train somebody, we train people on pulling meats off of our smokers for 3 to 4 months before one of us is not standing next to them pulling meats with them. And to think about a position where it's the meats is like that, where I'm telling people that some of them have 10 years in the business, and I'm like, it's going to be 3 to 4 months till you get it. We just hired a young woman who's coming from another barbecue place. She's been with them for 2 years. And off the street, I don't know that I'm going to find somebody in this market that will have her base knowledge of barbecue right now. This isn't Texas. In Texas, you can get a pit master all day long, all over the place, that have worked with great restaurants because they're all over Texas. There are not as many here in Virginia. And so for us, it's, for me to not be here and for you to get the same quality every time, minus some variations if somebody cut something a little bit wrong. But we really, most people say that we're very consistent. And to keep that consistency level, that 3 to 4 months training for a guy or girl in the pit room, it's for real. Because it sounds like just throw some rub on some ribs and throw them in there, but we check every rib, we check every butt, every brisket, every chicken, because a lot of other places were like, oh, the ribs all been on 6 hours. Well, if you took, let's say, well, I'm gonna pick on Brendan for number 55, but Brendan's a big guy, right? He's probably weighs more than me right now because he's playing football, but let's say he's 325 pounds, right? But he's lifting weights, whereas I'm like 285. I've been as high as 320 since you've known me. If you were to cook us, we'd cook differently because I'm now softer, I'm older, I've worked more, but he's leaner. So he's not going to have as much fat in him and all that. It's the same with animals. Every pig is different. Every cow is different. So you may get one shoulder from one pig that was raised differently out in a field versus being penned up, and they're going to cook differently. They had a harder life or weren't fed as well. And so you've got to check every piece of meat exactly every time. And that's hard for people to understand. And, we've had some chefs come here and work with us that thought barbecue would be easy, and they found it extremely frustrating because they never get it.
Going back, Ken Hess with County Smoak Barbecue. What's your favorite piece of meat to eat, Ken? Whether it be yours or somewhere else, what like rib, brisket, pulled pork? What's your wheelhouse?
Well, I think for every day here, our smoked turkey is probably what the staff we tend to go to the most. That and the chicken are probably the lightest in terms of richness, that where you could eat a turkey sandwich and you don't feel like you need to go take a nap.
Yeah.
I almost never eat one of our stuffed potatoes because I'd be down for the count. You know, they're huge, and the line, they'll eat two of those in a sandwich, and I'm like, even in my
Mm.
prime, I don't think I could eat two in a sandwich. But these guys eat so much. But um, if you're talking steaks, I love a ribeye. I remember when I staged at the Greenbrier, I was staging with a guy named Rich Hoffman working the beef line, and there was tenderloin. He's like, "Hey, you want a tenderloin?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll eat a free fillet, sure." He goes, "Yeah, I'm bored with them," and I thought, "There's no way I'm ever going to be tired of a fillet of beef, right?"
Yeah.
And I won't touch one with a 10-foot pole now because they just don't have the flavor that I like. I mean, I like a ribeye, I like a skirt steak or a hanger steak, something that has more connective tissue and more flavor to them to me than a fillet. So the meat that people say, what are you most proud of? Our brisket is probably the one that we put the most work into to get it to where it is today. But our pork butts are amazing. We sell the most of pork sandwiches, then mac and cheese, and then but the brisket probably sells out faster. But it's one of those tricky things too. It's like, you know, sometimes what you have to work harder for, you're proud of than the easier things. And
Right.
pork butts were easy because at Big Bob Gibson's we did so many pork butts, and we won competitions with them. Pork was easy for me and Jess when we opened this because we'd been doing it for so long. The brisket and getting to a level of brisket like going after like those Texas Austin places like Franklin's and Style Switch and Valentine's, or our friend Billy Durney's place in Hometown Barbecue in Brooklyn. We had a very specific goal of this is the brisket we want to replicate or get as close to, and to get there now with even just in switching smokers. We taught some barbecue classes in the spring, and I'll be driving somewhere going to do something. And I'm thinking like, how am I going to talk about this recipe in this class? And I go through it in my head a few times, and I thought to myself, if I was taking this class a year ago, it would be a different class than today because we changed our brisket process up since we've opened, even
Mm.
because we got a new cooker that was a dark environment inside the chamber. We added a spray. We added a wrap earlier. We were still wrapping in butcher paper on the old Jed Masters that we have, but that cooking environment is a much moister environment. The moisture retention is way greater in there than the Endeavor. So we would wrap in butcher paper at the end of our cook, not in the middle. And now we wrap in the middle.
Mm.
And you try to adapt, and just like any athlete, if Kyle Rhodes' 3-pointer's off, he's there after the game trying to sink him again, and he's throwing hundreds of shots back up, but he's tweaking one thing here and there to make it better, and we treat it the same way. We keep notes on what the weather is, what type of smokers we're using.
Wow.
Am I using Excel beef? Am I using IBP? Am I using Nebraska's Best, Iowa? I mean, we keep notes on all that stuff because just like any of the athletes that you interview and work with, we have to be that specific. And you mentioned for people new to barbecue, I always tell them change one thing on your next cook.
Mm.
Don't go change the rub, the smoker, the type of wood, and the sauce and the change one thing.
Mm.
And every time that you go and cook, change one more thing, whether it's how long I'm cooking, the temperature, change one thing, and that's going to make you a more successful barbecue chef or cook over the time. And that's something that I don't see younger cooks doing that as much anymore. Everybody wants to have that Instagrammable post or dish, but you don't understand the why behind the dish, then you don't know how to adapt it and change it for today's market. And
Mm-hmm.
that was something that when we were training at the Greenbrier, we read Escoffier, which is like the French chef, the king of chefs, they call him, who codified the brigade system in kitchens and the standard recipes and all this stuff in French cuisine. And, we used to have to read the first 63 pages every year at the Greenbrier. But then when you read those classical dishes and how they made them, Now I have a foundation of cookery that now I can change it and modernize it for today's taste or equipment or techniques that weren't there 150 years ago, and I can keep it adjusting. And I guess I keep going back to football, but football's been played 150 years in this country,
Yeah.
and there's still some techniques and things that are the same, but like the equipment's changed, the amount of medical attention these guys get now, and the amount of lifting. I mean, when I was coming up in high school, weightlifting was starting to be a thing, but I watched that quarterback show with Mahomes and college athlete since he was 12. I mean, it just makes him that much better of an athlete than anybody that was playing in the 90s would have been. And I think that's the same as cooking. You see a lot of guys are trying to do more restaurant and sous vide and all this, but if they mention the basic braising principles and sauteing principles to start, then just putting stuff in a plastic bag and putting it in hot water, if you don't understand what's the principles behind it, you're just mimicking. You're not cooking and creating. And I think that's a hard thing for new young chefs to figure out.
Well, Ken, we have learned so much in the 40 minutes we've talked to you. We've talked about temperature of the smoker. We've talked about taking notes as you grill and smoke. We've talked about the texture of the meat, and just appreciate you pulling back the curtain about what you guys do at County Smoak. And for those on YouTube, for those on YouTube, there's the journals. You can see them right there, stacked 1, 2, and 3, and more of those to come with Ken Hess. Ken, best of luck to you down the road and with County Sunrise as well out there on Lakeside Drive. We just appreciate the time, and a great friend of ours here with the Hill City Highlights podcast, and a friend off there as well. So we appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be invited, and I look forward to listening to the next couple of years.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Hill City Highlights podcast. Have an idea for future shows? Email our team at hillcitypod@gmail.com. And join us each week for another episode of the Hill City Highlights podcast.